Jump right into it then. I'm saying jump right into it yet. We have been, doing a long introduction. But anyways, so let's get started. So tonight, first of all, we want to welcome all our precious Zoom I don't even know what to call it. I should really figure out the right terminology for this. But thank you all for joining. And thank you for all our Torah Anytime for listening into these shiurim. So tonight we are learning Le'ilu Nishmat Avraham ben Chaim Yehuda and Yecheskel ben Avraham. Tonight, the purpose of tonight is, and I believe the title is also Segulot, to remove suffering. And B'ezrat Hashem, tonight I want to go through 5 Segulot, and we use that title specifically, Segulot, not because it's like, oh, Segulot, everybody loves. Segulot in general, when you're speaking about a Segula, people usually think, shortcut, let's do it, how do I not do what I'm supposed to do to still get what I want? That's what I want to do. Give me the shortcut. So in a sense, we are going to speak about shortcuts, but more importantly, what we're going to discuss is very, very important concepts that are so imperative that it has the ability to make it into a shortcut and thereby removing the suffering that somebody may or may not be undergoing or will have to undergo. So let's start off. We're starting off with a quoting from Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon, who goes and says that in the recent years, and he's talking about in his day, in the recent years, there was, we see a great increase in suffering. And we could certainly, relate to that today. We see suffering in, parnasah, in livelihood, in health problems, even in the homes, broken homes, even with children, difficulties with children, the unfortunate, events that we see where you have young parents, mothers or fathers that are passing away, leaving, children, orphans at home. And we see that there's a lot of suffering that's going on. And we can never fully understand how God runs the world. As much as we try to and as much as we would like to, we can never fully understand. And even, by the way, this is very important, even if we go and we look in the Torah, and the Torah says, if you do this, then this is going to happen. Even when you're looking at that, we're not a prophet to say, you know why this happened? Oh, because I did X, Y, and Z. So we have an inkling, we have an understanding, we have a basic, fundamental of why maybe something is going wrong. But at the end of the day, when you're dealing with God's calculation, we don't know. But we still wonder why. Like, what's going on over here, especially in our day and age? We're not dealing with the consequence of war, of so many casualties of war. There's no major catastrophes, putting aside Corona. There's no major, situations that we're going through that it explains why there's so much suffering nowadays. However, when you look at the world, you see that there is tremendous amount of suffering. It's common. It's so common that we become, immune to it. It's sort of like you hear of a young child unfortunately pass away, especially during nowadays. I can't emphasize this enough how careful we have to be during the 9 days, where you have unfortunately we hear every single year children that unfortunately are swimming in a pool or whatever it is, and Rahman al-Litzan, there is suffering that goes on, and we start to think what's going on, why is all this happening? So Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon goes and explains as follows. He brings down from the Torah in Parashat in Shemot, he goes and he says that when God goes and tells Moshe Rabbeinu, and he sends him down to Egypt, and he says, I want you to go and take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And God gives Moshe Rabbeinu a secret sign so that the Jewish people will be able to accept him. And he gives that sign, and the Jewish people accept it, and they get excited. Their hopes are up, and finally, we're going to get out of this exile. And then what happens? He goes to Paro and he says, let my people go. And what does Paro say? He says, why are you disturbing these people? And not only that, Paro says these people have time to chat and talk and think about redemption and getting out of here. He says, must be they have time on their hands. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to go and we're not going to give them the amount of bricks that they usually get. And what they would have to do is now they would have to go and they would have to make their own bricks, but their quotas of the amount of bricks that they have to build will not be reduced. So basically what Paro did when Moshe Rabbeinu came and told him this, Paro just increased the workload by tenfold. So now, Moshe Rabbeinu goes and he goes to God, he's like, what did you do over here? God, why do you do this to me? Why do you do this to the Jewish people? And we see in Shemot chapter 5, verse 22, it says, Lama herata la'am hazeh, lama zeh shalachtani. God goes to Moshe Rabbeinu. Goes over to God and says, God, why did you cause harm to these people? Why did you send me? He says, I thought the whole purpose of this was me to go down to Egypt and take the Jewish people out. But what do I see over here? I go down to Egypt, and what's happened? It makes it worse for them. What does God answer a few psukim later? And you see in Shemot chapter 6 verse 1, it says, "Ata tireh asher e'aseh leParo." Now you will see what I will do to Paro. The question is, what's going on over here? Why did God do it this way? Why did God do it that He made Moshe Rabbeinu go down? It made it more difficult, and then God says, "Oh, you want to see what's now going to happen?" Like, why did it have to happen that way? It simply could have happened that Moshe Rabbeinu could have gone down, and Paro could have refused, and instantly the plagues should have started. But why did this have to be the suffering state of the Jewish people? So, when you look at the following psukim, and actually it's also the previous, there's something very interesting, that there were Jewish supervisors. So there were sort of a group of Jewish, let's call them just slaves for what they were, the Jewish slaves, and they were working for Paro. And then overseeing them were Jewish police officers that were overseeing to make sure all the work was done. And above the Jewish police officers, there were the Egyptian taskmasters that oversaw those. Think of it sort of like a business, like you had the lower end, then you have the middle, the middle management, then you have the upper management. So the middle managers, which was the Jewish supervisors, they shared in the misery of the Jewish slaves that they were working so hard. And the question that Rabbi Matisyahu Salomon asks is, why do we need to, why is this so important? Why is it so important to know this? So says Rabbi Matisyahu Salomon, a beautiful pshat, a beautiful understanding. You want to know how people can go and bring an end to their suffering in all circumstances? So in general, we know that if you're going through something bad, so you have to increase your merit. If you do tshuva, obviously you have to increase your merit. But what happens if your merit that you're increasing is insufficient? Maybe the gap between where you need to be and where you are is too great, and you don't have enough time, enough ability to fill up with that merit. Maybe there is a shortcut. Says Rav Matisyahu Salomon, he quotes Rav Elia Lopian, and he goes and says there is a shortcut. And what's the shortcut? The Gemara in Shabbat, page 151b, says something so important. What an important concept. I'm going to say it first in Aramaic, and then we will translate it to English. Kol hamerachem al habriot merachim alav min hashamayim. Whoever goes and has mercy on other people, they're going to have mercy on him from heaven. And the Gemara continues, Kol she'eino merachem al habriot. Whoever does not have mercy on people, ein merachim alav min hashamayim. Heaven does not have mercy on him. Meaning that God, as we know, works measure for measure. Everything God does is measure for measure. So what does that mean? That when you're acting merciful, when you're acting kind to other people, so then God will act kind and merciful to us. So goes Rav Elia Lopian, goes, let's go back to what happened over here. Let's see what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu first went down to Egypt. And what happened? At the time of the redemption, there was a problem. The Jewish people needed to be redeemed, but they didn't deserve to be redeemed. They didn't have the merit. We know the Jewish people were in the Memtes Sharei Tumah. They were in the 49th level of Tumah. They were on the lowest level of Tumah. But God wanted to redeem them. So what was God going to do? God had to figure out, I'm going to have to orchestrate, engineer, if I could say, a situation that the Jewish people should be able to get that merit to be able to get them out. So what did God do? God had to go and engineer a situation where the Jewish people could show extreme empathy for the others. And once the Jewish people showed empathy for the others, then God will show empathy on them, and then God will release them from the slavery in Egypt. So what happened? HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and he caused the bondage of Egypt, the slavery, to become so intense, so much darker, so much more bitter, that the cause of suffering to increase for one reason. And what was that reason? The reason would be that it would result in individuals and people that have a higher sense of sensitivity. They would start feeling the suffering of their fellow Jews. And when they were starting to feel the suffering of their fellow Jews, this would go and trigger the merit that they need to be saved from Egypt. So who are these amazing individuals? Says the Torah, these were the shotrim, these were the police officers, these were the Jewish supervisors. These were the ones that were able to go and save the Jewish nation. So what happened? The Jewish police officers oversaw the Jewish slaves. And the quota was raised I should say the workload was raised, where now the Jewish people no longer got the bricks. They had to find the bricks and make the bricks by themselves. And the Jewish police officers were supposed to keep tag. What's going on over here? Who has how many and who is falling short? If someone falls a little short of their bricks, then they will get a little bit of a beating. If they fall a lot, short of their quota, then they will get a great beating. And the Egyptians would go over to these Jewish police officers and says, okay, give us the report at the end of the day, at the end of the week. What's going on over here? How many did the Jews do? How many are there lacking? And the Midrash goes and says that the Jewish police officers would refuse to tell the Egyptians of who fell short. And they're like, why are you not telling us? We're not going to beat you. He says, you're not held responsible. Whoever, it's the slaves that are going to be held responsible. You guys just tell us and we're going to go around. You're not going to do any of the beating. We're going to do it. But still the Jewish people refuse. The Jewish police officers refuse to give over their fellow Jews to the Egyptian taskmasters. And what happened? And they ended up getting beat for it. And you know what the Jewish police officer said? It says better that we should get beaten for it than the slaves and our Jewish brothers and sisters, that they should get beaten for it. By this act of extreme empathy that the Jewish police officers showed to God, this activated God's attribute of extreme empathy as well. And this set the whole exile, the redemption in motion. This set the Yetziat Mitzrayim in motion. This is how Rabbi Leplan goes and explains. What did God say? God says, now you shall see what I'm about to do to Paro. Meaning that God had to trigger something. The feelings of the shotrim, the feelings of the police officers went and triggered the redemption. Now God says, because Moshe Rabbeinu going to God and says, what are you doing? He says, why did you cause such suffering to the Jewish people? And God says, no, you don't understand. Now that you see the suffering, now you're going to see what's going to happen. Because the Jewish people did not have the merit that they needed. But now that there was an increase in suffering, this caused the Jewish police officers to go and show that empathy that they had. This triggered the God's empathy, gave them the merit that they needed, and all of a sudden this is what went and allowed the redemption to begin. When we look back in our lives or throughout history, when you see periods of severe darkness, difficulties, you know what we see usually? These darkness are usually placed right before redemptions, right before a tremendous amount of light. And that's the way that it works, that the very darkness brings out the light. The darkness brings out the dawn. So there are times where we look in life and we're like, why is God doing that? And by the way, that's these times. Explains about the Segulot Solomon. He says these are the times that we're living at right now. These are dark times. These are difficult times. We see all our brothers and sisters, all our, the Jewish nation going through so much suffering. An unusual amount of suffering. So how does Rabbi Segulot Solomon goes and explains it? He says that our generation apparently has not accumulated enough merit to earn the redemption. So what happens? God wants Mashiach to come. God wants the redemption to happen. So God has given us the key. And that key is darkening our world, making difficulties in our world. And we cannot help but see, everywhere we turn, there's more people suffering, there's more difficulties. There's, unfortunately, we just get, hopefully we're just getting out of Corona. And who knows what the future has to show. Hopefully, it'll be only good. But we're looking at it's a difficult situation that we're dealing with. And why is that? Because this is the key that God gives us. God gives us the key that we should go, and God's saying you have to go and step up to the plate, start having empathy, start caring for your brothers and sisters, start saying what's going on to my fellow Jewish brothers and sisters that they're going through so much suffering. And when we release that, when we have that feeling of that emotion of empathy for our fellow Jews, that triggers God to have empathy on us, and that will in turn trigger the redemption. Explains Rabbi Segulot Solomon that suffering is not always a punishment. Suffering can also signal the opening of Sha'arei Rachamim, the gates of mercy, to help us get something that we have. So this is the first Segulot that we spoke about. The first Segulot is have mercy on other people, and Hashem will have mercy on you. You want to get out of your suffering? You want to get out of your difficulties? Start worrying about other people. It's very, and it's not easy, by the way. When somebody goes through difficulties, it's very hard to see other people's difficulties. Because when you're in suffering, when you're in pain, you can't, you're in your pain. Like when someone's stomach is really hurting them, they can't start thinking, okay, maybe, my back is hurting me also. But if the severe pain is in the stomach, that's all you feel. So if you're going through very, very difficult suffering, it's very hard to stop for a second and be like, you know what? Like other people are also going through it. And like, God, forget about me for a second, but what about my fellow brothers and sisters? Let's go to number 2. When we look at number 2, the Zohar in Bereshit goes and says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has mercy on a person. And what does God do when he has mercy on a person? So God sends him a gift. What is the gift? God will send him a poor person or somebody who is in need of something. that this person can feel compassion and they will go and help him out. And the second that you help out somebody else, all of a sudden now you deserve of help as well. So let's say somebody is in need of a big salvation, a big Yeshua, but he's undeserving. So God orchestrates an opportunity that this person will be able to go and be able to have that merit for a Yeshua, for a salvation. As we see in Tehillim, chapter 41, verse 2. It says, Ashrei maskil eldal biyom ra'a yimaltehu Hashem. Praiseworthy is one who looks after the poor, because on the day of disaster, on the day of calamity, that's when God will rescue him. Meaning that when a person is experiencing his own troubles, but he gives his time and money to other people, then Hashem will surely have mercy on him. There's such an important act of chesed. There was a major askan, someone who deals a lot with the public and helps a lot with the public in London. And this is going in the time when the Chafetz Chaim was still alive. It's prior to World War I. He goes and he decides, he needs to go and he asks the Chafetz Chaim, the Gadol Adol, the greatest rabbi of the generation. He wanted to ask him a question. And the question that he asks is that he's so involved in public work that it sort of takes away from his home life. So what he wants to go and ask the Chafetz Chaim, he says, maybe I should reduce the amount of help that I'm doing to the public, and then I'll be able to focus more on my family. So he goes over, at that time, the Chafetz Chaim was staying by a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Akiva Schreiber. He was hosting the Chafetz Chaim. And he asked this Rabbi Schreiber, he says, could I please join you in some sort of meal that I could maybe ask the rabbi this my question. So he said, fine, come on this and this day for breakfast. So this guy comes in for breakfast, and before this askan, this person who helps the public a lot, before he's able to talk, the Chafetz Chaim goes and recites a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 23, verse 6. And he says over there, David HaMelech says, Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yimei chayai. Translation is, may only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life. Ask the Chafetz Chaim, why does David HaMelech use the word yirdefuni? Yirdefuni is pursue. It's something that's used to describe troubles, pain, suffering, afflictions, not something good. So why is David HaMelech going and saying, Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, let only goodness and kindness chase after me? We should use a different, maybe a vernacular, different terminology. So the Chafetz Chaim goes and answers like this. And he says that the kindness that this person does takes place the troubles that he would have to endure. Meaning that this person is going through difficulties now because he's helping so many people. But that difficulty is not for naught. What's going to be with that difficulty? This person has to go through a certain amount of suffering. So what happens is that if someone now goes and is working very hard, he's on phone calls late at night, he's going and he's giving a lot of his money to other people and he's trying to help people out, he's trying to make connections, whatever it is, he's trying to help Jewish nation, he's trying to help Klal, he's trying to help the world. And it's difficult. He's losing time from his family, from his business, from so on and so forth. And what am I supposed to do? Should I continue or should I not? Says the Chafetz Chaim. It says when somebody has to go through suffering, if he goes and he's helping other people, he's also going through difficulties. He's also going through suffering. You know what happens? That takes place of the suffering that he would have to go. Meaning that now, because he is going and he is helping other people and he is having difficulties in it, that replaces the suffering that he would have to do. And this is the concept that we spoke about before, that people do unfortunately sins that is, let's say, the sins of karet, and they want to do tshuva. And part of the Rambam goes and explains this in Hilchot Tshuva, that part of the tikkun process for removing that sin of karet is a person has to go through suffering. But the question is there a way to get out of that suffering? And this is something we spoke about before, and the answer is yes. That if you go and you're doing mitzvot and you're learning Torah and you're suffering, it's going difficult for you, but you keep on doing it, you know what happens? That takes away from the suffering that you would have to do. Rabbi Sol Salanter brings down a mashal that there was once a person who committed a terrible crime. And he went to court. They caught him, he went to court, and they convicted him. He was going to spend many, many years in prison. And they sentenced him to prison. But the family started begging the lawyers. He's like, you got to make an appeal. We're going through too much. And the lawyer is like, there's nothing that's going to happen. He's guilty. It's like very obvious. And they said, no. We got to make the appeal. We want to present our side of the story. So the lawyer says, fine, I'll try. He puts the appeal, and the court decides that they're going to hear what the family, the friends, whatever it is that they want to say. So they come to the appeal, and all of a sudden you hear, this criminal's parents, his elderly parents come in, and they start testifying and say, this is our son. And he was our sole support. He supported us. He says, I understand that maybe he did something wrong, but why do we have to suffer? The parents. How are we going to go and live on? How are you going? By you're taking him and putting him in prison, we're suffering as well. And then the wife comes on and she says, why is it if my husband did something wrong that me and my children have to suffer? Who is going to go and support us? He says, is this fear? And one relative after another says, what's going on over here? It says, just because he did something wrong, we have to suffer? Now, of course, the court's not going to be like, oh yeah, what are we going to do? It says if he's guilty, he's guilty. There is an injustice to the justice system, but that's the way that the world works. The justice system is faulty. But when you're talking about God, the way that God judges and the way that God, takes out that judgment in this world, nobody innocent is going to be hurt by that sentence. Meaning that God's justice is a different nature. If God inflicts suffering on someone and God's actions are perfect, that means that if that person is going through suffering, that means that everybody else around him or her that is resulted in that suffering is also due that suffering. Meaning no one gets undue suffering. Says Rabbi Laplan. He goes and he says, according to this, it will be so worthwhile for you to have a lot of friends. It would be so worthwhile to have a lot of people love you. It would be so worthwhile, and this is the most important part, that you have a lot of people rely on you. You want to know why? Because this is going to get you through the judgment day. This is going to get you through any judgment. Because if, let's say, you're guilty of some transgression, and now God is going to have to go and give you some sort of punishment. But now God's going to have to be forced to take into consideration all your friends, your family, and everybody who relies on you. And if they do not deserve to be punished, then you don't deserve to be punished. And you're not going to be able to be punished. I want to share with you a beautiful story that Rabbi Lezer Parkov brings down. There was once a young boy, very smart, like a genius. And all the rabbis, all the parents, this guy is going to become huge in the Torah. He is so enthusiastic. He understands it so clearly. He's a blessing to have in the class. So with this such good, feelings from his rabbis, he really did excel. And he got accepted to one of the finest high schools in Israel. And he would, in there, this particular high school, he would dorm. And he would come home once a month. And the mother was so proud of her son. Did so much, such a bright son, using his wisdom, using his abilities for such good, that she would go, every time he would come, she would pamper him, his favorite food, his favorite, everything that he wanted, he got. One morning, at 4 a.m, the parents get a phone call. And 4 a.m. phone call, never good. They get a phone call, and they, it's the police on the other line, and they say, there was an accident, and their son was injured. They're like, an accident? It's 4 a.m. What do you mean? He's like, just come to the hospital. They rush to the hospital, and the details come out that, the boys, there was a bunch of boys in the yeshiva, all underage. None of them have a license. They went and decided to, go driving. And unfortunately, they got into a severe accident, and the driver was killed. And their son, which his name was Aryeh, he was, he was sitting right next to, right by the driver's seat, and he was, severely, injured. And, when all this came out, the parents were deciding, how are we supposed to relate to this? He's such a good kid. What happened? How did he fall into this situation? But they decided, the amount, he lost a dear friend. He also had, emotional pain, physical pain. He was going through so much, they decided they're not going to probe on this. But they noticed that the accident affected him. The accident affected their son Aryeh. He was becoming distant. He was becoming, further away, not only from the family, but also from Yiddishkeit, also from the Jewish, living. And then one day, Aryeh comes to his parents and he says, I'm leaving the house. I see that I'm causing you too much aggravation. He says, I'm leaving yeshiva. I'm leaving the house. I've chosen a different path in my life. And he went, as much as the parents tried to beg him, he was not listening. He went to live on some kibbutz in Israel. 2 months after he leaves the house, the father, which was a rabbi, he had an opportunity, came onto his table, and it was a new kollel that was opening up in Hong Kong. Now this, when this happened, this is when Hong Kong was, there was not much Jewish, Orthodox communities going on, and now there's a little bit more. But back then you had, Sephardi businessmen usually traveling over there, so there was a small Jewish community over there, and they wanted to bring this rabbi from Israel to Hong Kong for sort of a 2-year contract that he would be able to go and teach the people. And not only that, for the Rebbetzin, for the wife, they would also provide a job so she would have an income as well. So the rabbi goes over to his wife and he says, listen, this opportunity came up. What do you think that we go for 2 years to Hong Kong? So the wife goes and says, but what about our son Aryeh? He's in a kibbutz. So the father, the rabbi, says, what are we supposed to do? He left already. He's obviously not interested in coming back. So they decided what would be best for them is to go to Hong Kong for 2 years. And they go and they pack up and they leave. Now, the wife, decided that this is what her focus now is going to be like helping the Jewish community. And that was the husband also. That's what the husband, they would go and they would invite people for Shabbat, and he would spend hours with his guests. People over there weren't so religious. So he explained about Shabbat, explained about Torah, explained about all different halachot and what the purpose of it, the beauty of Judaism. And the wife saw this and she got very inspired. She says, you know what, I'm also going to do this. And she went full force and also decided to do kiruv. She also decided to do kiruv v'chokim, try to bring the Jewish people closer to God, closer to the Torah. One Sunday, the wife was going out in the marketplace, and she notices there was a boy and a girl, a brother and sister, that were selling something in the marketplace. And she noticed them, from the area, they were Jewish people, not religious, but they were Jewish. So she goes over to them. She says, what are you guys doing there? They were like teenagers. So they said one word, money. We're trying to make some money. So the wife goes and says, listen, he says, I see you're selling a lot of beautiful things over here. What if I buy a tremendous amount of your merchandise, a tremendous amount of your product? Will you come to us for a Shabbat meal? And they said, for that, of course, get, a big sale and get a free meal. We're in. So they came that Friday night. The brother and sister came to that Friday night to this rabbi and the Rebbitzin's house for the meal. And the rabbi was talking and the Rebbitzin was talking and they were trying to inspire them. And the boy, which his name was Yitzchak, he was very inspired. He was like, completely enveloped. The girl, on the other hand, she wasn't feeling it so much. And after the meal, the girl goes into to the hosts and they said, listen, we appreciate what you did, but here's where I bid you goodbye. The boy, Yitzchak, on the other hand, he sort of became connected, and he became connected to the rabbi, and he started coming to learn with the rabbi, and he started coming to the meals, more and more meals on Shabbat, to the rabbi and the wife. And after a while, he became so connected that he sort of became part of the family. And meanwhile, this boy is 15 years old. He lives in Hong Kong, and the parents are like, where are you going all this time? And they're like, oh, I'm going to this rabbi's house for the meals. So they said, so we would like to meet with this rabbi that you're visiting so often. So they meet with the rabbi, and they were also very impressed. They said, you know what, we would appreciate, we're very happy that our son is spending his time with you and not with his friends hanging out in the street. So they approved of the situation. And after this point, Yitzchak over here was a regular at the table. And the husband, the rabbi, spent so much time investing to Yitzchak. 2 years go by, the contract is over, and now it's time for them to go back to Israel. But Yitzchak is like, I don't want to leave you. I grew so much from you. I learned so much. It's like, what, are you going to leave now and I'm not going to have that anymore? So he was very adamant. He says, I want to go to Israel. I want to come with you. And Yitzchak's parents, he spoke to his parents, and Yitzchak's parents went and they spoke to the rabbi and his wife, and he says, listen, our son is very adamant. We're very impressed with what you've done. We're okay with going if you're, able to go and watch over him in Israel. So the wife, she sort of wanted to laugh. He's like, you want me to watch your son? It's like, I'll take care of your son, but where's my son? Some kibbutz somewhere? But she didn't say anything, and they said, fine, yeah, we'll take care of your son. And the son went with them, Yitzchak went with them, and they put him into a Baal Tshuva yeshiva, and there he thrived. Meanwhile, they get back to Israel, they settle in, and now the husband and wife, they try to locate their son. They haven't seen their son Aryeh in 2 years. So they located where he lives, and they went and they drove down there. But he was still such in a bad state that he would refuse to meet with his own parents. He refused to meet them. So they didn't want to push anything there, and they left it alone. 2 additional years passed by. And at this point in time, Yitzchak, the boy from Hong Kong, he became part of the family. He picked up on Hebrew, he was speaking Hebrew very well, and he was learning very well. He became part of the family. In fact, the parents shept so much nachat, so much enjoyment from this boy. And then the holiday of Sukkot approached. And Yitzchak, the boy who came from Hong Kong, informed, his, let's call him foster parents at this point in time, that he's going up on a tour up north. He said, fine, enjoy. Erev Simchat Torah, he comes home, and they noticed something was off with him. And they tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't say anything. He remained very quiet. Nothing happened. They couldn't figure out what was going on. 3 months passed by. All of a sudden, 3 months later, there's a knock on the door. They open up, and the mother shrieks. There is standing their long son, Yitzchak. And he goes in, and they start talking, and all of a sudden, Yitzchak comes in. And now they start plugging things together. This is where Aryeh, the son, starts saying the story. He says, 3 months ago, Yitzchak came out on a trip to up north, and he came there, and I was a tour guide. Says Aryeh, their son, and I was starting to become friendly with all my customers, and I was speaking to him, and this Yitzchak was saying, he's originally from Hong Kong, and now he's about Tshuva, and now he's living with the Man family. And he's like, wait, the Man family? That's my name. That's the Man family. And all of a sudden, Aryeh, the son's like, wait a minute, did they replace me? What happened over here? I left, they found another kid, and they brought him into the house, and it sort of gave him a little bit into a shock. And Yitzchak, on the other hand, he was also shocked. He says, here's a non-religious boy standing right in front of him, the son of his adopted, family, and that are so religious. It just blew him away. He didn't know how to process it. So Yitzchak, the boy from Hong Kong, decided that I'm going to do something else. He says, I'm going to return the favor that his parents did to him. And he decided for the next 3 months, he spent a lot of time with the boy Aryeh. And Yitzchak at this point in time was 2 years already in yeshiva. He was, a very good learner. He knew a lot. And he was basically spending a lot of time learning with the son Aryeh, trying to bring him closer to God. And eventually it started working. He got to the point that Aryeh was willing to go home to his parents. And eventually he came fully back home, and Baruch Hashem, he became fully religious. And when the mother was saying over the story, she had an album, and in the album over there, here you see that we are dancing at Yitzchak's wedding, and here right next to it, we're dancing at Aryeh's wedding. He said, Yitzchak today, the boy from Hong Kong, is living a religious life. He has 7 children, and you know what the mother said? It says he's considered our son in every single way. And what's even more beautiful is that him and Aryeh are blood brothers, heart and soul together. They're connected. This boy from Hong Kong was able to go and bring back their long lost son that they weren't able to do anything. You want to know what the power of chesed is? The power of chesed is that when you go and you help someone else, you don't really see it always, but you're really helping yourself. Here you see a family that went to Hong Kong, and they took in this boy, even though that their own boy was out in the kibbutz somewhere in Israel. But they decided they're going to help someone else. But you know what? They were really helping themselves, because the help that they gave to that boy really circled back and helped their own son bring him back to them. This is Segulot number 2. Chesed. Increase your chesed. The more that you increase your chesed, that will be able to get you out of your suffering. Let us move to Segulot number 3. There's a story in the Garden of Emunah that it brings down that there was once a young lady, very successful, beautiful young lady, comes from a very respected family. She ended up, finding a chatan from also a very respected family, very wealthy family. And they lived together. They were blessed with children. They were blessed with wealth. They were blessed with happiness. They were blessed with really everything. And, they really used their blessings for good. Like the wife, which was a very modest, she would go and she would be a great mother, and she would help the community. She would, help with the organizations. The husband at that point in time gave a significant amount of charity. He also spent a lot of time, learning Torah. He also spent a lot of time praying. And everything was just they were known as that's the couple, they're a good couple, amazing couple, do so much good. Then one unfortunate day, there was a drunken soldier that came and went and found their 3-year-old son. And this soldier went abused, mutilated, and ended up murdering this couple's 3-year-old son. And unfortunately at the funeral, thousands of people joined this funeral, and they joined in the mourning. But they started asking, is this what the couple deserves? Look at this amazing couple. They do so much for the public. They're so righteous. They give so much charity. This is what they deserve. What did this little child have to do? Why did this little child have to suffer so severely? So what happened? Some people, this caused them to weaken their emunah. And the couple, on the other hand, they reacted with this with total emunah. They accepted this as a divine decree, and they continued their righteous lifestyle. They continued giving them a lot of charity. They continued doing chesed. They continued learning Torah and praying. They continued everything that they were doing. But a short period goes by, and all of a sudden, this merchant, the successful, tzaddik of a merchant, he falls deathly ill. And they send all the doctors, the best doctors, but the doctors, they gave up hope. They said it is only a matter of time. And unfortunately, a few days later, the merchant, returns his soul to heaven. Now you have over here the additional mourning on this family. This is the tears of a young 35-year-old widow. This tore the community apart. They'd be like, why does so much bad happen to this amazing family? And the widow never could have, she never really got out of it. Years passed by. she had a married son that, would come visit her, and he says, mother, like, what's going on? He's like, you gotta, you gotta lift up your spirits, because every time he would see her, she would burst out into tears. She would constantly be crying over the loss of her husband, over the loss of her child. And the son goes and says, mother, so many years have passed by. He says, we don't know God's consideration, we don't know God's plan, but we know that everything that God does is for the best. He said, the son goes over to the mother and says, mommy, when you cry, it not only saddens us and it hurts us, your children, but it also saddens our father's soul. He's suffering also. Why do you have to go? So many years has passed by. You have to go move on. So many matchmakers, so many shatchanim went and they were chasing after you. It's time to move on with your life. So after her speech from her son, she decided that she's going to make a strong change in her life. She's going to go and she says, you know what? I always trusted in God. She says, why shouldn't I be happy? And you know what? That night she decided, she turned the switch in her mind, and she decided she's going to become a happy person, a new person. And for the first time in many, many years, this widow slept so well, so peacefully. That night she had a dream. And in the dream, she's in this exotic, amazing, beautiful garden. There's so much beauty, there's so much beautiful, scenery that's going on. And all of a sudden, an old man walks up to her. And all of a sudden she clicks and she realizes that this is not this world. She's in the next world over here. And this old man with a long white beard goes over to her and says, would you like me to show you your deceased husband? And she's like, yeah, please. And she brings him into a place where you see this young man is going and he's giving a Torah lecture to thousands of elderly righteous people. So she walks up and she sees it's her husband. And she says, my dear husband. She says, what's going on over here? She says, first of all, she asks, why'd you leave me? You left me alone at such an early stage in our lives. And secondly, he says, what are you, a teacher over here? You were a merchant. I mean, you were a tzaddik, you were a righteous man, but you were never like a rabbi, a teacher, like, to this extent. So the husband goes and says, in a former life, I was a great scholar. But the problem was I never married. And when I died and I went up to heaven, they told me that I can't assume my designated place because I did not fulfill the first commandment of the Torah, Puru u'ovu, go and have children, be fruitful and multiply. So I was given the opportunity to be reincarnated again. For one purpose, my sole purpose of coming down to this world is for marrying and having children. And he says, once I went and I completed my tikkun, my soul was corrected, there was no longer a reason for me to remain down in this world. So therefore I died young. So then the wife goes and says, but I have another question. So what about our little son? Says, why did our son have to die so young, so difficulty? So the husband responds and says, our son was a very, very high, righteous person with a high-level soul. Huge tzaddik. In a previous life, he was kidnapped at birth, and he was raised by non-Jewish people. Until the age of 3, the family was able to go and redeem him, and then he, later ended up becoming a great chacham, a great sage in the Jewish world. But he was left with a little bit of a blemish. That, he was raised by non-Jews for the first few years of his life. So his correction, his tikkun was that he would be returned in this world, and he'd be raised for 3 years by a righteous, upright Jewish woman. And he says, you, my dear wife, were granted that privilege of being that woman. So the wife says, fine, I understand the calculations, but why did his death have to be so horrible? Why did he have to go through so many difficulties? So the husband responds and says, he was destined to die anyways. That's what the court has decreed. The heavenly court has decreed. But unfortunately, there was another decree as well. And there was a decree, there were so many sins happening in our town that there was a decree that there was supposed to be a pogrom. There was supposed to be a very, very severe, situation in our town where many, many of its inhabitants will be destroyed. But our righteous little child, our soul, this righteous soul, he volunteered to have a terrible death as an atonement for the entire town. And he went and he sanctified himself as sort of a public sacrifice so the town doesn't have to go through any other severe difficulties. And you should know that because of this, he reached such a high level in the next world that nobody is allowed to go and enter that level except for me because I'm his father. And he goes and he says, when your time comes, you will also be allowed to enter that area. And then the father goes, and this is the point of the story, and he says, and you should know that only by the virtue of your reinforced emunah was I revealed to you. He says, as long as you are in a cloud of sadness, a cloud of depression, a cloud of difficulty that you are harboring in your heart, I couldn't come to you. And in fact, you almost lost another child. And as I tried, I gave so many requests that I wanted to be revealed to you and I wanted to explain to you, but it was all refused. Because my tikkun was over, but you have so much more to do. So, but now with your revivement of this, reinforcement of this emunah, this gave me the ability to be able to go and explain to you this. And now I want to tell you, my dear wife, my tikkun is over, but you still have a lot more to do. He says, go and remarry, have a life of emunah, have a life of joy, and you will be very successful. And with that, she wakes up. When she woke up, her life has changed. This, completely changed her mindset. Pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 32, verse 10. It says, "V'habotech ba'Hashem chesed yisodavenu." One who trusts in God, the chesed, the mercy will surround it. Rabbi Victor Miller goes and explains something very beautiful. When God spoke to Avraham, and God told Avraham, your reward is very great. Avraham says, he expressed his grief. He had, was like, that's nice, but I don't have any children. And Abraham goes and says, no matter how successful you're going to make me in this world, it will not mean anything to me if I'm not going to be able to have a child in this world. He wanted somebody to go and carry on his name, carry on his ordeals, carry on his ideals, more to say. So what did God say? God says, no, you're going to have children. You're going to have many, many descendants. What does the pasuk say after that? In Bereshit chapter 15, verse 6, the Torah testifies, it says, V'hemin ba'Hashem. And Avraham Avinu trusted in God. And what does it say afterwards? V'yachshav lo letzedakah. And God counted this emunah of Avraham Avinu as tzedakah, as like righteousness. He earned tremendous amount of merit from his emunah that he had in God. Now let's try to understand this. Avraham Avinu waited a very, very, very long time to have a kid. And he wanted a kid specifically with Sarah. Sarah was very great, and he knew that together they would be able to produce a wonderful offspring. And eventually, after a very long time, they were blessed with a child. And then Yitzchak, he was a beautiful boy, really went in the footsteps of his father and his mother. And he was a ben zikonim, he was loved by his parents. They gave him everything to Yitzchak. And then suddenly God tells Avraham, go and bring your son as a korban, as an offering to me. Now, when we're reading the story in the Torah, we know that Yitzchak wasn't going to get slaughtered, so we're like, okay, we're not like sure, like what's happening, cliffhanger, like what's going to be with this situation. We know that Yitzchak is going to get out, but back then Abraham was bringing his son Yitzchak. He thought that he was going to go and his son is going to die and he's going to lose his son. Like that was that was his mindset. That's what the that's what the cards showed. So the question Rabbi Victor Miller asks says, so he goes and he brings his son for korban, and we say this is a greatest test for one of the greatest things that Avraham did. Says Rabbi Victor Miller, what's so great about this? During that time there was many sacrifices, human sacrifices that happened. So what's so exceptional about Avraham? And the answer is that there is a very, very big difference on how an act is performed. That when Avraham was ready to perform this act, this sacrifice, he was doing it with complete love to God. Complete ahavat Hashem, complete love to God. He was going, even though it was the most difficult trial that he was going through, but nonetheless, he trusted in God. He says, listen, like whatever God says, that's what I'm going to do. A man, explains Rabbi Victor Miller, can give his life for God. But at the same point in time, he can have a little bit of reservations, be like, like maybe he does something, but then he feels a little bit bad about what he did. The good thing, he did something good, but he feels a little bit bad about it. Maybe he feels a lot bad about what he did. And he says, why did this happen to me? Why did I do this? Couldn't I live my life and maybe serve God the same level, but with peace and happiness? He was ready to do everything for God. But the emotion was like, I wish it could have been a little bit better. I wish it could have been this way. Maybe I didn't have to go through this amount of suffering. When he got rewarded for giving his son, he was not rewarded for the mere act of bringing his son for sacrifice. He was rewarded for his trust in God, his level of his happiness that he was able to go with this. Now, people go through disasters and suffering in life. Says Rabbi Victor Miller, this is unfortunately, we don't want it, but this is a great opportunity. It's not so much about the disaster, but it's how we react to it. The disaster can turn out to be your greatest success. It depends on how you relate to it. This is how you live with Emunah. When you live with Emunah, that is making your troubles, your difficulties to a great amount of success, because you're going and saying, whatever God does for the best, I accept it. That woman that we said in the previous story, she was able to get out of her salvation. Why? Because of Emunah. Avraham, his reward was what? Because of Emunah. Segulot number 3, to get rid of your suffering, is emunah. Live your life with emunah. Live your life with happiness. That everything, everything that God does for the best. That's Segulot number 3. Let us go to Segulot number 4. There is a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 25, verse 23. It says, Hashlech el Hashem yavecha v'hu yichal kelecha. It says that you should go and throw your burden up to God, and He will sustain you. The Magid of Duvna goes and explains. In a mashal, there was a famous story. There was a poor man traveling, and he had a very big, heavy bag with tremendous, it weighed very much on him. And he was carrying it, and meanwhile there was a wealthy man with a very large carriage who was driving past by, and he sees this poor man. He was holding this tremendous bag, was weighing him down. His back was hurting him. He was going through so much trouble. He says, my dear friend, why don't you come? Where are you headed to? I'm going to give you a lift. So the poor man is so thankful. He gets onto the carriage, and he's sitting over there, and he's holding onto his heavy backpack. And initially the wealthy man is giving the ride. He's not saying anything, but after a while he goes over to this poor man and says, "Listen, I have to ask you." He says, "Why are you holding your backpack still? Put it down on the floor over there. Like, why? I see that you're in pain. And you see that you're in suffering. What? Just put it down." And the poor man goes and says, "Listen, my dear friend, you're doing me such chesed over here. You're taking me so far." He says, "What am I going to make you carry my bag also?" He says, "No, you're bringing me to my destination. I'm going to carry my bag." So the wealthy man goes and says, "You fool." He didn't say fool. He was doing chesed. He says, whether you're holding it or whether it's on the wagon, it doesn't matter. My horses are pulling the weight regardless of what you're doing it. Take it off your back, put it on the floor. It's the same weight. It's not changing. You're not removing anything. Says the Dubin the Magid. We have to realize that God is carrying us through our lives. If we go and we hold all our baggage with us, we hold all our difficulties with us, you think that's going to change anything? You think that's going to make anything? God is already giving us the ride. Put the bag down, and God is going to take us on the ride and, continuing. The Midrash in Tehillim goes and explains that God is not like a human being. What is a human being? You go to, a friend, a good friend. You have a favor that you want to ask him. And you ask him for the favor, and he does it with such happiness, and he's like, "Of course I'll do it. You're my best friend. I'll do anything for you." And he does him this chesed, this kindness. Now, there's a few months go by, you have another need for this friend. You go back to this friend. You say, "Listen, you helped me out so much last time. Can you please help me out again?" And he says, "Yeah, of course. You're my best friend. Of course I'll help you." A little bit less enthusiasm. And he helps him out. What do you think is going to happen the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 15th time, 20th time, 25th time? How is this person going to feel when he's going and he's asking his best friend, "Hey, by the way, can you help me out?" Now his best friend's going to be like, initially he was so excited he'll help you out, but eventually after 450 times of him giving you money or him going and helping you out, eventually he's going to get a little bit fed up with it. That's the way that human people work, unfortunately. But God doesn't work that way. If you go and you ask for God for something and you get it, or you don't get it, doesn't matter, you ask for it, and then a short while goes by and you ask for God for something else, and you keep on asking for God 450 times, you think God's going to be like, "What's with this guy already? I gave him so much already, just leave me alone." Says it doesn't work that way. The Midrash goes and says, the Pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 145, verse 18, it says in Tehillim, "Karov Hashem lechol korav." God is close to all who call out to Him. Meaning that more that we ask of God, the more that He loves it. It's not going to say, "Oh, how many times are you going to ask me? How many times are you going to bother me already?" No. The more that you ask, the more appreciative, the more that God enjoys that. People sometimes think, I don't want to bother God. Someone's driving and they want to go and find a parking spot and be like, "You know what? Should I ask God for a parking spot? Let me save it. Let me save, when you got to go and you ask someone for a favor, you want to make sure you utilize it to the best of your ability and say, "You know what? I'll ask God." No. Ask God for everything, from the smallest thing, from a parking spot, which if you live in Brooklyn, it's a huge thing, but, or I don't know, buying you a mansion with, vacation, whatever it is that you want in your life. You could ask God for everything and anything. There's no problem, because God is taking you through the life anyway. Stop holding on to your luggage. Put it down. God is taking you anyways. Start talking to God. You want to know what's the 4th Segulot? The 4th Segulot to get out of the suffering? 3 words. Daven, daven, daven. Translation: pray, pray, pray. Speak to God. God is there waiting for you. Don't think that you're bothering God. God is there waiting for you. You want to get out of it? Talk to God. Talk to the one who gave you these problems. There is a reason what's going on. Just talk, go and daven. That's number 4. Let's look at the final and 5th one. Rav David Asher goes and brings down a pasuk in Shemot, chapter 6, verse 5. It says that God goes and says, "V'gam ani shamati es na'akat b'nei Israel." And I also heard the moans, the pains of the children of Israel, the Jewish people. Asks the Sefer Ki Ata Imadi. Why did God say also? Who else is listening over here? Like, God says, I also heard the screams and the cries of the Jewish people. Who else is in on this screams and cries? And the answer is that the people themselves heard each other's groans, heard each other's suffering. When a Jew over there saw the pain of his friend, he wished that this friend could have it easier. When Hashem says, oh, you want him to have it easier, I also want to be included in this. And I also came in this. Says the Gemara in Bava Kama, page 92a. It says, whoever prays on the behalf of his friend, he will be answered first. Now, this is not something magical, like a trick. This is a merit. This is an exceptional merit that a person, when you empathize with someone else, especially if someone else has that same problem, the reason why this is so important. Let's say you're going through something very difficult, and you know the difficulty of what it is, and you go and you want somebody else to say, you know what, I don't want anybody else to go through the suffering that I went through, and you sincerely want that other person to go and succeed and get out of the suffering. There's such a merit in that, and you should know that there's different reactions that people have when they're going through suffering and other people are also going through suffering. So one reaction will be, let's say somebody is an older single and they're trying to get married, or they could be, let's say they're trying to have children, or maybe they're trying to make money, and all of a sudden they hear another older single that got married. Or this woman, then couple had tried to have children for a long time and finally they were blessed with a child. This businessman just closed a huge deal and made a tremendous amount of money. So some people feel worse about this. Be like, why then? What happened to me? When is my turn? Like, why can't I have that same success? The ideal response, the correct response, and this is what some people think of also, is like, Baruch Hashem. I am so happy that they are getting out of their suffering. I know what that suffering is like. I know what they're going through. I'm so happy that they're not going through it anymore. You know what a segula is over here? That you show that you want other people to have that happiness that you're lacking. The Ma'ayan Chaim brings down a story. There was once a couple that they were married for many years without any children. And they went over to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, can you help us? We don't have children for so many years. So the rabbi goes and says, go find another couple and pray for another couple who also can't have any children, who have not been blessed with children. So they said, fine. And they go and they've been praying and they pray for this other couple, but still they're not blessed with any children. So they go back to the rabbi. I said, Rabbi, we did your, what you recommended. We went and we're praying for this other couple, and there's still nothing happening. So the rabbi says, this only works if you truly and sincerely want that other couple to have children. It's not just about saying the words. It says if you're praying for the other couple just because you want to have that child, then you're really just praying for yourself. So the couple says, fine. They went and they decided that they're going to play fully, they're going to work on themselves, that they really want that couple to have a child. And they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and guess what? They ended up getting pregnant and having a child. And Rabbi David Asher goes and brings down, a woman sent them an email that she was a single mother of 3 children. She was divorced for 10 years. And she says, she trusted other people and they kept on failing her, and, she was going through difficulties in her life. And she came to the point, she realized that, I learned, I'm just going to turn to God and speak to God directly. And she goes and she says in the email that Baruch Hashem, she merited to get engaged recently. And 2 days before that, her best friend, which is also divorced, also got engaged. And she goes and says, we've been praying for each other. And this woman who's writing the email to Rabbi Asher, and she says, I even asked God, I want this woman to get married before me. That's the level that she really wanted it to happen. And later, after they got engaged, they found out they both started dating on exactly the same day. You want to know the 5th and final skula that we're going to speak about tonight for removing your suffering? That is, pray for somebody else who's going through the same suffering that you're going through. Because but you got to really mean it. You got to really want them to get out of that. And when you do that, then whoever prays for somebody else, they get answered first. Let's do a quick recap and then we'll open up for any questions. We said we brought tonight 5 different skulot to get out of your suffering. Skula number 1 is have mercy on others. We quoted a Gemara in Shabbat, page 151b. Kol ha'merachem ala berot, merachamim lo alav min hashamayim. Whoever goes and has mercy on other people, they have mercy on you. Segulot number 1, have mercy on other people. Have some compassion on other people. Segulot number 2 is increase your chesed, increase your kindness. The more that people depend on you, the more that you, well, I should say the less likely that you will get punished. Because the more that people depend on you, they need you. And if you get punished, they suffer also. And maybe they don't deserve to get punished. So now Segulot number 2 is increase your chesed, increase your kindness, have other people depend on you for the good ways. Segulot number 3 is Emunah. The power of Emunah has a power to go and get you out of suffering and prevent suffering also. Live life as Emunah. It's a win-win situation. You're living your life, a happy life, and you're also preventing problems from coming. Segulot number 4 is the 3 words that we said, daven, daven, daven. Pray, pray, pray. Pray and ask God to get you out of the suffering. And finally, the 5th one is pray for somebody else. Pray for somebody else who's going through that same suffering, who's going through that same difficulty. And with these 5 Segulot, may God help each and every single one of us that may we never have any suffering that I need to go through, because we all checked off all these boxes and we have no need for it. And with that, we'll open up to any questions. Okay, we have here some questions. Okay, you guys could type in the questions. Question number 1, in regards to what you are saying about how we can avoid suffering. If other people are relying on us, suffering is often a tikkun for something and very much for our benefit. So if we interfere, then perhaps we'll prevent something that our soul really needs. So that's a good question. So the question is as follows, that if God does suffering, then there's a need for that suffering. So if we go and we're doing all this Segulot, then it's going to prevent that suffering from happening. Maybe it's good for us. So the answer is that this Segulot is a merit that suffering, whatever benefit could have came out of it, you already received it from these Segulot, from these good things that you did. Meaning that you don't need that suffering anymore. Because if you need it, you'll get it. But by doing this, it takes you out of the need for the suffering. And if it takes you out from the need of the suffering, then all of a sudden there was no benefit of that suffering. If there's no benefit of that suffering, then there's no suffering. Go on to the next question. Question number 2, when we pray to God for a specific thing, are we supposed to daven for the same thing during each tefillah that we daven that day? Or should we daven some things by shachrit, different things by mincha, and different things by aravit? What is the best way to do it? So if I understand this question, if I understand this concept, the question, then when you're praying for something, pray for something 3 times a day, 100 times a day. Don't say, okay, like for money, shachrit. For health, mincha, and so on and so forth. No, you could pray for everything that you want every single day. And in fact, it's very important to know that when someone's going through, something that they're praying for something, it's not only in shachrit, mincha, and aravit that you could pray for it. You could also pray for it throughout the day. In fact, you could just be sitting in your car and praying to God, talking to God. God, please help me with X, Y, and Z. Help me with, A, B, and C, and so on and so forth. Okay. We have here another question. It looks like this is the final question. With the 5th Segulot, is it only with the same suffering? So the 5th Segulot that we mentioned was that pray for somebody else. Somebody else is going through that suffering. So the power of this Segulot is that yes, you're praying for somebody who's going through the same thing that you're going through. However, and I'm very happy that you asked this question, that this is important, that a person doesn't have to go through difficulties to go and pray for somebody else. Meaning that, let's say somebody, Baruch Hashem, is blessed with children, but they want to go and pray for somebody else with children, but they're thinking, maybe I should put my prayers to somebody else, something that I don't want. No, when you go and you pray for somebody else, even though you have it, that will give you tremendous amount of hatzlacha and bracha in the same things that you have. So it will help you with your children as well. So yes, the Segulot specifically, reference to something that you need as well, but it shouldn't, be close to that. You should be, praying for everybody and anybody for whatever it is that they need. Okay, it looks like that was oh no, we got another question. What about the high holidays? I can't attend shul since my whole family is a health risk. So there is a concept of ones rachmana patri, that if somebody is, wanted to do something, but it's out of their ability to do it, it's counted as if they did it. So let's try to understand this concept. If somebody goes and has the ability to do a good deed, and they don't do it, so they don't get reward for that good deed, and then sometimes they get punished for not doing that good deed. But let's say somebody wants to do a good deed, but they can't for reasons out of their control. I'm talking about real reasons. I'm not talking about like not in the mood. Like I'm talking about real reasons. If there's real reasons why your person can't do it, so then that's an onus. An onus accounts as if, if you really want to do it and you couldn't do it, it counts as if you did it, so to speak. So obviously a person has to go and think about all their situations and say, okay, can I really not do it? Or do I really not want to do it? Am I looking for a way out? Obviously, there's a lot of factors to factor in over here. But at the end of the day, a person has to understand that God only wants us to do what we're capable of. More than that, God doesn't, ask of us. Okay. Any other questions? Because it looks like we're done with the questions. Okay. Question of follow-up for that: will I be judged badly if you didn't do something wrong? Meaning that if, let's say, you couldn't do a certain mitzvah, but because you couldn't do it, you don't get punished for that. That's not something you get punished for. So, for example, let's try to use example. During the Holocaust, let's say the people, I don't know, couldn't do a lot of mitzvot. They couldn't, let's say, for example, put on tefillin. The people are not going to get punished for not putting on tefillin because they literally were not able to put on tefillin. And in fact, the Jewish people in the Holocaust that wanted to put on tefillin, that they had the desire to put on tefillin, but they didn't because they just didn't have the tefillin, they get rewarded as if they did it. So you don't get judged if you want to do something and you can't do it. You don't get judged because you didn't do it. You just physically can't do it. It's an onus. All right, and that looks like the final question. And with that, we will end Chazak Ubaruch.